He touched my wrist, not like a man, but like someone trying to listen through skin. So gentle, like he wasn't sure if I'd vanish when he did it. And honestly, I wasn't sure either. I didn't flinch. But I wanted to, because I didn't know if I could still feel anything at all. You know that numbness? That quiet kind, where everything looks normal on the outside, but inside you're just disconnected? Like your soul got up and left the room a while ago, and you're just waiting for it to maybe come back? Yeah, that's where I was. And they told me it was hormonal. Said maybe it was stress, a little burnout, emotional fatigue. Maybe I needed more sleep, more yoga, less caffeine. You know the drill. But none of that was it. None of that even touched it. Because the truth was, nothing felt real anymore. Not my laughter. Not my body. Not even me. I was living in grayscale. Smiling at the right moments. Laughing on cue. Nodding through conversations I couldn't feel. And every night, lying next to a man who kissed my forehead. Like I was made of glass he was too afraid to really hold. He was kind. He brought me tea. He rubbed my back when I couldn't sleep. But somehow, even with all of that, I felt like I was disappearing right in front of him. And it scared me. Not because I didn't love him, but because I didn't know how to explain that I didn't know how to be in my life anymore. And then, the doctor looked at me. Not with pity. Not with answers. Just this calm stillness. Like he saw right through the noise. And he said, "Let's start with the truth. What do you really want?" That question? It cracked something in me. Not like a dramatic movie scene where I burst into tears. No, it was quiet. Almost too quiet. But inside, I swear to God, it felt like someone had finally opened a door I didn't know I'd locked from the inside. So before I take you deeper into this story, before I tell you what happened next, how I unraveled and remembered things I didn't even know I'd forgotten, can I just ask you one thing? Would you do it? Would you let someone reach in and find the part of you thought was broken, and maybe show you were never broken at all? If that question makes you feel something, then you're exactly where you need to be. This is Olivia Touching Tales. If you're new here, hit like, subscribe, and stay close. Because the rest of the story, it changed everything. And I think it might touch something in you too. Let's keep going. That thin crinkled beneath me, sterile, cold, it felt like it belonged in someone else's story. And I sat there, half covered by a gown that opened in the back. More exposed emotionally than physically. The air in the room wasn't cold, but I still shivered. Nerves, maybe. Or maybe it was the unfamiliar feeling of being seen. Not scanned. Not diagnosed. Seen. He didn't have a clipboard. No screen between us. Just hands resting on his knees. And a kind of stillness in his body I hadn't felt in a long, long time. His voice was low. Not seductive. Not clinical. Just present. Like he was trying to meet me exactly where I was, without dragging me anywhere else. And in that silence between us, I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. I hadn't felt warmth from a man in, God, months? No, years. Not real warmth. Not the kind that wraps itself around you, without needing anything in return. My husband, he's not a bad man. He kisses my cheek before work, brings me tea without me asking. He remembers how I take it, honey, no sugar. He rubs my back when I can't sleep. He cares. But he doesn't reach. Not anymore. And honestly, I stopped giving him anything to reach for. Somewhere between bedtime routines and keeping the fridge full and being good and quiet and grateful, I disappeared. Not all at once. Little by little. Like mist fading in sunlight. And my body? My body had become a function. Not a feeling. It existed to walk, to cook, to fold clothes. To nod politely when he touched me. To press back into him because that's what I thought wives were supposed to do. Even if my mind was already somewhere else. floating, detached. There were times, many, actually, when I'd close my eyes, and I'd try to imagine feeling him again. But nothing happened. My own touch felt like someone else's. Mechanical. Muted. Even my reflection had become unfamiliar. I'd look at my face and think, she's tired. She used to be soft. Now, even softness felt like a memory I couldn't touch. And then, he moved closer. The doctor. Slow. Careful. Like approaching a wounded animal. But he didn't touch me. Not really. His fingers just hovered, barely above my skin, as if he was asking permission with his breath. And my breath? It caught, right there in my chest. Not because I was afraid, but because something deep in me whispered, he sees it. The part of me I've hidden so well for so long, that even I forgot it was there. There was no flirting, no crossing lines, no game, just this still, heavy presence. And in that space, I started to remember what it felt like to want. Not for attention, not for escape, but for aliveness. That ache. It was coming back. Not loud, not all at once, but soft and steady. The feeling of being touched, without being touched. He asked me simple things. How my body felt. What areas held tension. Where I felt most numb. But it wasn't about symptoms. It was about listening. Inside. And as I spoke, he stayed quiet, present, tracking every breath I took. Like each inhale told him a story. About where I'd been. And what I'd given up to get here. I wasn't in love with him. That's not what this was. It was deeper. More dangerous. Because for the first time in years, someone wasn't trying to fix me. He was trying to find me. And that was the most intimate thing I'd felt in a long, long time. Would you believe me if I told you? That kind of connection can crack something wide open? Not because it's wrong, but because it feels so right. It makes everything else you've been pretending suddenly unbearable. That's where I was. Still on that paper sheet. Still half-dressed in a gown too thin to cover the truth. And, for the first time, I didn't want to cover anything anymore. Not my need. Not my silence. Not my hunger to be seen. And as I sat there, body buzzing without being touched, heart beating in places that had been quiet for too long, I realized I wasn't broken. I was just unmet. And maybe he could meet me there. For real. Do you want to hear what happened next? Because this was only the beginning. Let me take you deeper. It wasn't that I didn't want him, my husband. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I did. I do. But something deeper had gone quiet inside me. Not suddenly, not violently. It just faded. Like a room you keep turning the lights off in, telling yourself you'll go back later. But you never do. And eventually it gets dusty, then forgotten. That's how it felt. He would touch me. Softly, the way he always had. Ask me, do you want me to keep going? And I'd smile, nod, whisper yes. Because I thought maybe if I just stayed in it long enough, the rest of me would catch up. But the truth? I was already gone. Not out of the room. Just out of reach. I wasn't done. But it wasn't his fault. He was doing everything right. Exactly the way I'd taught him to love me. Exactly the way I'd told him I needed. Back when I didn't know I'd change. Back when I still believed in enough. And it started to feel cruel. Lying like that. Not with my words. With my silence. With the way I'd let him believe he was still holding me. When really, he was holding a memory. We tried, you know? We really tried. We talked about therapy. About date nights. About how maybe we needed more sleep. More fresh air. More magnesium. He even researched vitamins that supposedly boost mood and libido, as if I could swallow a pill and find myself again. But what we didn't talk about was the void. That ache that wasn't physical. That empty space just beneath my ribs. That pulsed whenever I was alone. or when I wasn't. We didn't talk about how I'd lie awake beside him, his hand resting on my hip, and wonder, does he feel it too? That I'm here, but not really? That I'm kissing him, but not entirely? That I'm saying I love you, but part of me is watching myself say it. From across the room? I didn't want more sex. I wanted to be seen, truly seen, broken open, lit from the inside. I wanted someone to sit inside that ache with me, not try to fix it, not explain it away. Just stay there. Feel how deep it went. And the worst part? The part one never said out loud? I started to wonder if that part of me was just dead. Not dormant. Dead. That woman who used to feel things in her skin. Who used to need. Not just touch, but the ache before it. The anticipation. The edge of being undone. Where did she go? I missed her. I missed the woman who looked in the mirror and smiled at her own softness. The one who wore a dress for how it made her feel, not how appropriate it was. The one who used to ache in a way that made her feel alive. And the hardest thing? She never left all at once. She just got quieter. Until one day, all that was left was a version of me that knew how to perform intimacy, but didn't know how to feel it. I wasn't unhappy, but I wasn't whole either. And then, this man, this doctor, he didn't touch that ache. He named it, without ever saying the word. He sat there in that soft space between science and soul. And I swear to you, it felt like he reached into that void and whispered to it, "You're not broken. You're just waiting for someone to stop asking, 'What's wrong with you?' and start asking, 'What's missing?'" And what was missing was me, the real me, the one who still wanted, still longed, still believed that her body wasn't just a thing to use, but a place to return to. I didn't know where that part of me had gone, but in that quiet, sterile room, with the paper crinkling beneath me, and the hum of the heater behind him, I felt her stir, faint, but real, and suddenly I was terrified, because if I felt her again, I might not be able to go back to pretending I didn't miss her. Would you? Would you be able to go back to sleep after someone gently woke up the part of you you thought you'd buried? I didn't know it yet, but I was on the edge of something that would change me completely. And it all started with a question I never let myself ask. What if I'm not broken? What if I'm just untouched? And what if someone completely unexpected was finally reaching me? Not with hands. Not yet, but with truth. And once truth touches you like that, there's no pretending you don't want more. Stay with me, because what happened next? It was the moment everything began to shift. He sat across from me, legs crossed, quiet. The soft light from the window cast a warm glow on his face. He wasn't looking at me like a patient anymore. Not a problem to solve. Not a puzzle to fix. His eyes, there was something different there. Something more understanding. Like he knew things about me I hadn't told anyone. But I couldn't explain why I felt the pull toward him. Why my body felt alive in ways it hadn't in years. There was a stillness in the room. A pause that stretched between us like it was made for breathing. And then, he broke the silence. His voice was steady, not forceful, but it carried something that stopped me in my tracks. Do you ever feel like you were built for more than you're being given? His words, they didn't hit me all at once. At first, it felt like a question I could easily brush off. But then, it settled in my chest. Deep. The kind of question you don't ask unless you already know the answer. I didn't know how to respond. Because he was right. And admitting it felt like tearing open a wound I'd spent so long trying to stitch up. I swallowed, the lump in my throat making everything harder. The weight of the question wasn't about my marriage. It wasn't about sex or love or even him. It was about me. And that was terrifying. I whispered, barely above a breath. Yes, but I don't know what it is anymore. I didn't know what it was. what I wanted, what I was missing. I only knew it wasn't the life I had now. And the ache. The hunger. It wasn't something I could drown out anymore. He sat there, watching me with a kind of patience I didn't deserve. Not rushing me, not pushing me, just waiting. Like he knew I was trying to piece something together. That was too fragile to speak too soon. Then he said it. The thing that unraveled everything. What if it's not a disorder? He asked, his voice soft. But there was something sharp in it too. What if it's a hunger, a language your body remembers, that your life forgot? And that hit me harder than anything else. Because that's what I was. I was a language that hadn't been spoken in so long. I didn't even recognize the sound of my own voice anymore. Hunger, not for food, not for the small, predictable things I thought I needed, but a hunger for more. More than what I'd been settling for. More than what I'd convinced myself I could ever have. And suddenly I felt it again. That old ache. Not just in my body, but in my soul. I remembered it. The deep desire for something that felt real. Something that called me back to life. He leaned forward, just a little, and spoke again. We could explore that. Not as a diagnosis. As a reclamation. If you wanted. The word reclamation landed between us like a gift I wasn't sure I deserved. Reclamation. To take something back. To reclaim parts of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Not fixed. Not changed. But returned. Refound. I stared at him, heart pounding in my chest. Like I was standing at the edge of something vast and unknown. I didn't know what he meant by explore. I didn't know where this was going. But I could feel it. The possibility. The invitation. And then, his voice dropped, quiet but clear. If I could show you how to feel again, without breaking your life apart, would you let me? I was frozen. 1,000 thoughts fought for space in my head, but none of them made it to my mouth. It wasn't about desire. It wasn't about attraction. It was about everything I'd lost, everything I'd shut off, shut out, pushed so deep into the corners of my heart, because I didn't think I had a right to feel it anymore. And here he was, offering me a way back. A path to remember what it felt like to want, to need, to be touched in a way that wasn't just physical, but alive. But the question was, could I let myself want that? What if I said yes? What if I let him help me? What would that mean? What would that do to everything I thought I knew about myself? About my marriage? About my life? But maybe I was already lost. Maybe he was just the person who'd be there. When I finally let myself be found again, the silence stretched between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was just real. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like the truth wasn't something to be afraid of. I wanted to speak. I wanted to answer. But what could I say? How do you say yes to a question like that, when it's not just about what you're asking for, but about what you're willing to let go of? I didn't know. But somehow, in that moment, I realized I didn't need to know. Because the hunger, the one I thought had died, was still here. Still waiting. And maybe this was how I could finally feed it. I stayed quiet. But I didn't look away. And in that silence, I felt the beginning of something I hadn't felt in so long. Hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as broken as I thought. And maybe I was finally ready to let myself be found. Stay with me. Because this is where it all changes. The next time I saw him, he didn't bring up the same things we'd talked about before. He didn't mention vitamins or therapy or even sleep. He didn't give me a list of things to do. Instead, he offered me something I didn't understand. Something I hadn't even considered before. Somatic intimacy therapy, he said. And the way he said it, like it wasn't a diagnosis or a method, but an invitation, a choice. There were no candles, no dimmed lights, no soft music playing in the background, no attempt to make it feel like some kind of romantic gesture. None of that. It was just presence, stillness, Quiet. The kind of quiet that pressed against you until your heart couldn't help but beat louder. The kind of quiet that made you hear the soft, subtle hum of your own thoughts that you'd been trying to ignore for so long. And then he asked me to look at him. Not for a glance, not for a moment, but for as long as I could. As long as it took for me to let go of all the outside distractions. All the walls I'd built up. The eye contact felt like it lasted too long to be clinical. Too long to just be a routine, a check on a list. His eyes were deep. They weren't cold, weren't judgmental. But they held something I couldn't explain. Like they were seeing the parts of me I hadn't wanted anyone to see. The parts I'd buried. And what shocked me most was how easy it felt to just stay there. To stay with him. Not moving. Not speaking. Just being. "I'll lead when you're ready," he said softly. He was gentle. Patient. "But if you need to stop at any time, you can. This isn't about pressure." Pressure. He'd said the word like it was something foreign. Not something you're used to when you're trying to get your body to respond to someone else's rhythm. Not something you're used to when you're trying to please. Trying to meet expectations. This was different. He wasn't asking me to perform. He was asking me to be. To be present with myself. With him. Without expectation. Without the hurry. I didn't know what to make of it, but I was already in too deep. I felt like I was about to either drown in it, or let it pull me to something I didn't yet understand. He asked me to lie down. Not for touch. Not for anything physical. Just to be there. To let him witness me. To be seen without any filters. Without the walls I had hidden behind for so long. And then, something cracked inside of me. Something that had been there all along, but was too afraid to show itself. I lay down on the soft, sterile mat. Fully clothed. And still, I felt more exposed than I ever had before. In all the times I'd given myself to another person. In all the times I'd let my body be touched, kissed, moved. Nothing compared to the vulnerability of simply existing in that room. In that moment. With him. He wasn't touching me. But somehow, his presence was more intimate than anything I'd known. It was like he was reaching into me, without ever laying a finger on me. He wasn't asking me to perform for him. He wasn't asking me to do anything. He was just there. And that was more than I could handle. I wept. Not because of anything he'd done, but because of everything that hadn't been done. All the things I had held back. All the parts of me I hadn't let myself feel. I wept before he ever touched me. My tears didn't fall for the reasons I thought they would. Not for him. Not for my marriage. Not even for the things I'd been missing. They fell because, in that moment, I was finally feeling the things I'd been running from. The ache I'd refused to acknowledge, and the truth is, I didn't know if it was a release or a beginning, but I couldn't stop myself from weeping. Not because I wanted to, but because my body, my heart, my soul had been waiting for permission. To feel anything again. To be held in a way that didn't demand. To be witnessed without judgment. Without the weight of expectation. And somehow in that space, I felt a little bit lighter. A little bit more alive. And yet, I was terrified. Because what if I didn't know how to walk away from this? What if this truth was too much? What if, in learning how to feel again, I lost everything, but what I didn't know yet, what I hadn't fully grasped, was that sometimes, in order to reclaim what's yours, you first have to let it fall apart. And maybe that was the only way to rebuild. It started slow, gentle. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew it wasn't going to be like anything I'd felt before. His hands rested on my shoulders. They didn't move. They didn't need to. They were just there. Still. Listening. As if waiting for my body to speak first. For my muscles to release their secret. For my breath to tell him where the tension was hiding. Where it had been for years. And somehow his hands knew. They followed my breath. Matched it, even. It was like he wasn't just touching me. He was attuned to me. in a way I couldn't explain. Not physical, not intellectual, but something else. Something deeper. When I breathed in, he breathed in with me. When I exhaled, he followed. There was something so simple about it, but it unraveled me in a way I wasn't prepared for. Each breath felt like a step towards something I hadn't dared to hope for. It wasn't about what we were doing. It was about how we were being. And, for the first time, I felt like I could let go of all the walls I had built, all the armor I had layered over myself, and just be. But it didn't stay still for long. He pushed deeper, moved us into the next phase. I didn't know if I was ready, but I wasn't going to stop it either. We moved through guided tension releases. My thighs, my spine, places I didn't even realize had been clenched. I had held so much in. So much for so long. Years of holding myself together. Of keeping the pieces inside where they wouldn't fall apart. Where they couldn't escape. When he touched my stomach, I gasped. It wasn't sexual. It wasn't about wanting. It was about feeling. It was like something long trapped inside of me was finally named. Finally released. I couldn't stop the trembling. My whole body shook in ways I didn't understand. I didn't even know what I was shaking off. But it wasn't just my muscles. It was something much deeper. Something I had buried under all the layers of I'm fine. I can handle this. But I wasn't fine. I wasn't handling it. And then, his voice. Calm. Deep. Will you let me lead you? His words were not an offer. They were a question. A permission. I didn't even have to think. I just nodded. Not because I had to, but because, for the first time, I felt like I didn't need to control anything. His energy shifted. He wasn't being forceful. He wasn't demanding. But there was something about him now. Something commanding. His voice deepened. And I felt the air around me change. It was like a current pulling me under. And, for the first time, I didn't fight it. I didn't resist. I had always fought. Fought to be in control. Fought to keep myself safe. But in this moment, I realized I didn't need to fight. Not here. Not with him. And then, he shifted again. He brought in someone else. A woman. Her energy was completely different from his. Where he was firm, she was soft. Where his presence was strong, hers was gentle. Yin to his yang. Balanced. A perfect counterpoint. I didn't even have time to adjust before she was there. Her touch, light and delicate, was placed on my heart. His hand rested on my back. And the world just disappeared. I was held between them. The contrast of their energy surrounded me, filling every space I had left open. One hand on my heart, one on my back, and everything inside of me started to dissolve. It wasn't sexual, at least not in the way I had understood before, but it was sensual. It was a kind of sacred energy that flowed between them. It was trust. It was a language I didn't know I'd been waiting for. I could feel it all around me, the weight of their presence. The calmness of their touch. The gentle pressure of their hands grounding me, but never forcing me. Never pushing me. It wasn't about pleasing them. It wasn't about doing anything. It was about letting myself be. Letting myself be held. Letting myself be seen. And when I thought I couldn't take any more of it, they didn't stop. They just built a cocoon of presence around me. A space where I could breathe freely. Where I could let go of every fear. Every self-doubt, every whisper that told me I wasn't enough, every belief that I was broken. My breath came in sobs. I couldn't stop them. It wasn't pain. It wasn't grief. It was something else entirely. Something I couldn't put words to, but I didn't need to. My body moved on its own. It wasn't conscious. It wasn't controlled. It just was. And it wasn't sexual, no. But it was deeply sensual. Sacred. I didn't feel broken. I felt alive. I felt every inch of me coming back to life. The parts of me that I thought had been lost, forgotten. The parts that had been silenced for so long. And I realized, in that moment, That I hadn't been missing the touch of another person. I had been missing myself. I had been missing the ability to feel, to be present, to be whole. And now, I was. And I didn't need anything else. I didn't need anyone to tell me I was enough. Because I already knew. There was no climax. There was collapse. It wasn't a moment of sudden release, no. It wasn't the kind of explosion I had always imagined. It wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It wasn't the kind of thing that had a beginning and an end. No, it was something different. It was a folding. A quiet, delicate folding of everything I had been carrying. Of all the years of pretending. Of all the layers of me that had been caged and hidden. I folded into myself. But not in defeat. Not in weakness. No, I folded into myself like a flower opening. Like a hand slowly stretching towards the sun. And then I unfurled. Slow, soft, but all-encompassing. All at once. It felt like lightning under my skin. Not an attack. Not something that hurt. But something alive. Alive in a way I had never let myself feel before. A flash of pure electricity running through my veins. Shocking me into awakening. It was like a window had been opened in a house I had forgotten had rooms. Rooms that had been locked away for so long. Rooms I had convinced myself didn't even exist anymore. But they were there. All of them. All the hidden parts of me. Waiting. And they came rushing in. The floodgates opened. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't terrified of what I'd find. I wasn't ashamed of what had been buried. I wasn't worried that the weight of it would drown me. No. I felt free. Free in a way that left me breathless. Unstoppable. They stayed with me. Silent. Still. Witnessing. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough. Their stillness was enough. It wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about us anymore. It wasn't about needing validation. It was about me. Finally, me. And in that silence, I realized I was the ocean. I was the storm that had been building beneath the surface. The waves crashing against the shore. The tide that had been held back for too long. I was breaking through the dam. But it wasn't chaos. It wasn't destruction. It was liberation. I had been holding myself back, believing that if I let go, if I truly felt, it would be too much. It would swallow me whole. But now I knew. I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of the waves, the crashing, the storm, because for the first time, I knew that I was strong enough to feel it all. I was strong enough to let it flood through me and not be swept away. I was the ocean, and I wasn't afraid. I came home. The door creaked as it always did. But this time, something was different. I wasn't the same. I didn't feel the weight of the day press on me. I didn't feel like a hollow shell anymore. The house, familiar in its silence, didn't feel like a prison. It felt like a space that could hold me, like I could breathe here again. He was there, sitting at the kitchen table. No rush, no expectations. He was just waiting, watching, but not in the way I feared, not in the way I used to think. He didn't ask what I'd been doing. He didn't press for answers. He just looked at me. And for the first time in so long, I didn't look away. His eyes, they weren't full of accusations. There was no suspicion, no hurt. There was no judgment. Just a quiet understanding. Like he could see something in me that no one else ever had. And then he spoke. His voice soft, tentative. Almost as if he was afraid of breaking the spell. "You're glowing," he said. "Did you find what you needed?" His words hung in the air, and I didn't know how to answer. Not because I didn't want to share. Not because I didn't trust him. But because the truth was more delicate than anything I could explain. What had happened wasn't something I could just find. It wasn't an object. It wasn't a thing I could grasp and hold. So I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. I didn't find it. I remembered it. His gaze softened, like he understood. Like the answer had always been there between us, but neither of us had known how to reach it. He sat back in his chair, silent for a moment, just letting my words settle. And then, with a quiet certainty, he said, "Then I'm glad you went." There was no bitterness in his voice, no jealousy, no fear, just reverence, an acceptance I hadn't realized I needed so much. He didn't ask me to explain. He didn't need to know everything. He just needed to see me, to know that I had found something that made me whole again, that I was no longer lost, that I wasn't just existing. I was living. He reached out, his hand grazing mine. Gentle, tender. There was no rush, no desperation, just the calmness of knowing that we were here, together, that we could breathe again in the same space. His fingers brushed over mine, soft, reverent. He wasn't trying to claim me. He wasn't demanding anything. He was just present. And in that moment, I felt seen. Not just in the way I had been seen by the doctor, not just in the way I had been seen by others, but seen in the way that truly mattered. By the one person who knew me best. By the person who had always loved me, even when I had been blind to my own worth. I wasn't broken anymore. I wasn't the hollow version of myself I had been. I had remembered. And somehow that was enough. I squeezed his hand gently. And for once, there were no words needed. He just smiled softly. And in that quiet, we found a peace I hadn't known existed between us. He saw me, and I saw him. Not as a husband and wife, not as roles we had fallen into, but as two people who had finally found the space to be. And I knew, in that moment, that we were both whole again. Not perfect, no, but real. Real in a way that was more meaningful than any perfection could ever be. No more pretending. No more hiding. Just us. Just us. And somehow, that was everything. Some people call it betrayal. Others call it awakening. But the truth? The truth is more complicated. It's never just black and white, is it? Life isn't that simple. Love isn't that simple. We spend so much of our time trying to define things, trying to fit them into boxes so we can understand them. But sometimes, the truth lives in the gray. And if someone you love is drowning in silence, do you anchor them? Or do you set them free? Do you hold on tight because you're afraid of losing them? Or do you let them go, trusting that in the letting go, they might find something that will bring them back to you? If it meant giving her what she truly needed, would you let it happen? Would you let her break open? Even if it meant you might be left with pieces of her that you didn't know how to hold, I wonder. If you were in my place, if you were the one watching her change, would you give her the space to find herself? Would you stand back, silent but present, just waiting for her to come back to you, but fully herself? Tell me, what would you do? I'm genuinely curious. This is Olivia Touching Tales. Like, subscribe, and stay curious.